Hi everyone, Paul Elam with an ear for men. Talking about values can be a tricky affair. After all, who's to say what values anyone else has to live by? There are certainly times when we do get to answer this for everyone. For instance, our collective value for the sanctity of human life demands punishment for murder in all modern cultures. At the same time, our value for life collectively takes a nosedive when it comes to humans who cannot speak for themselves, such as we do in abortion. In countries where we render swift and decisive punishment for killing a baby 2 weeks after it's born, we will look the other way, citing the rights of the mother when killing it 2 weeks before it's born. Even more disparity can be found in other places. Canada, for instance, passed an infanticide law in 1948 that reclassified the taking of an infant's life by its mother. From that point on, the crime was no longer considered a murder. It is instead infanticide, a significantly less serious crime that usually carries a maximum of a year in jail, with most mothers who kill serving no time at all. They are instead referred to counseling and other support services. We see even more evidence of this in systems of Western jurisprudence where it concerns women who murder their husbands. The so-called battered wife syndrome is used to acquit women of murder and other charges who claim they have been the victims of abuse. That includes women who could have simply left the home, but instead chose in premeditated fashion to kill their husbands while they slept. In the United Kingdom, women have beaten murder charges, and many of them have had murder charges reduced to manslaughter using premenstrual syndrome as a defense. We see the undermining of due process in alleged sexual assault cases on college campuses. The same thing happens in the criminal justice system with rape shield laws and men being convicted of sexual crimes in the absence of any forensic evidence. We are increasingly seeing the emergence of women-only train cars, parking spaces, even time at commercial gymnasiums being reserved exclusively for one sex over the other. The list goes on, from VAWA to child custody decisions to the way child support laws are so unevenly levied and enforced in the favor of women. It even extends to what sex we allow to be sexually mutilated at birth. What does this actually say about our values as a culture? The answer is simple. Gynocentrism is a cultural value that has a tendency to trump all other values. It trumps our sanctity of human life, it trumps our constitutional rights, it even trumps our basic sense of human decency. And however goes the culture, so goes our lives as individual men. The greatest threat to a modern man's personal values is not the temptation of greed. It is not the allure of success or the pressure to perform among other men. The greatest threat to the modern man's personal values is the modern woman, and that is a threat at which men have historically failed to face to their own peril. How many men, do you suppose, have allowed themselves to sacrifice good and trusted friendships because the women in their lives were jealous of the time and loyalty those friendships were given? How many beloved hobbies and interests have men abandoned because their women wanted them to occupy their time with things that were geared to produce for her? How many Steve Shiveses are there in the world without YouTube channels? For those of you who don't know who Steve Shives is, please see the low bar. It will link you to a great video by Sargon of Akkad where he dissects a conversation between Steve, a radical feminist, and his wife, also a radical feminist. In that video, they both conclude that Steve is at least a latent sexist because he prefers the TV show Angel over the TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and because his music collection is apparently male-dominated. Now, aside from the fact that both Angel and Buffy were TV fare for kids and the intellectually unemployed, the lack of assurance and rote deference to his wife are plastered all over Steve's face. You want to take bets on whether his friends have to pass her litmus test before he can associate with them? Sargon nails it with the conclusion that this can't possibly be a healthy relationship, and perhaps correctly lays this at the feet of feminist ideology. But it actually goes much further than that. This isn't just feminism at work. In fact, in interpersonal relationships, feminism isn't anything more than a guise for the more fundamental reality that in almost all relationships, it is her values, her desires, and beliefs that constantly pressure conformance in the man. Relationships based on romantic chivalry are a graveyard, not only for men's desires and dreams, but for their values, their sense of right and wrong. All of that is co-opted by the force of gynocentrism. That is not to give men a pass. The last thing men can afford is to hide behind the protective shield of victimhood. To put it in its most fundamental terms, most men will pair bond, and unless they are hopeless gynocentrists, they better figure out that relationships are first and foremost a battlefield. If they are not prepared to fight and to have lines in the sand that will trigger the nuclear option, they are doomed to fail. To help fine-tune this, it is better to understand that long-term relationships are a bloody fight even without gynocentrism. You have two individuals from two different backgrounds with two very different sets of rules and two different ways of viewing the world. After the honeymoon period, when couples have sex every time the doors close, when they only see the best in each other, and when neither of them can imagine that the other's shit actually stinks, reality sets in. That is when two very different worlds collide, and the battle begins to see whose rules are going to dominate. It involves things as simple as whether you open presents on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve, to whether you deal directly and honestly with problems or just bully each other till someone cries uncle. It is a process involving countless complexities and one that lasts many, many times longer than the honeymoon, often stretching into decades depending on the relative mental health of the people involved. I've heard, and I totally believe it, that it may take 20 years or more for a couple to reach a healthy, mature love for each other. All of this happens without considering the gynocentrism involved. Relationships are difficult because infatuation is transient and because blending lives, which essentially means two people having to live by an altered, unfamiliar narrative, is difficult on its own. The problem in modern culture, especially with relationships that start on a foundation of romantic chivalry, is that gynocentrism is a trump card that constantly puts the man at a disadvantage. Like I said, if we can issue a pussy pass for murder, what are the chances for your fishing trips to survive? How about your Saturday night poker games or your video games? And this, guys, is where men die. They die in spirit, they die in individuality, as does their ownership of their lives and happiness. To be blunter, those things aren't murdered, they are the victims of suicide. They are killed by the male's gynocentrism and his weakness in the face of a woman's demands. The pussy pass, my friends, is issued by men, most often by the guy who has it played against him. For every woman who walks on a murder charge, there is 1 million men who obsequiously bow and scrape like Steve Shives. The solution to this is tough, and it isn't for everyone. Some men are just not strong enough to allow their values and a woman to live under the same roof. So they check out, often hiding behind bitterness and resentment. They convince themselves that all women, and not their failure to be strong, is the problem. They don't trust themselves and don't have the aptitude to develop skills to weed out problem women and to shut women down when they become irrational and unreasonably demanding. Their shame drives them to resent men who have those strengths and aptitudes and prevents them from taking on the task of change. My father once told me, and I quote him here, "If you can leave your values at the door, you never really had them to begin with." Of course, at 16 or 17, that did not elicit much more than a yawn from me. I guess my old man, like many fathers, got a lot smarter with age, because today his words ring rich with wisdom. I never saw a man who got destroyed in a relationship who steadfastly clung to his values from day one. And I'm in a position to say that I've talked to a lot more men who were destroyed in relationships than the average person. The good news is that where it concerns values, men have the advantage. Most men are wired for accountability, honesty, and integrity. Men, as a rule, have the capacity to own their shit. They are perhaps less consistent at it where it concerns women, but they have that capacity to overcome if they aren't sucked into an ideology that tells them not to. So that is the thrust of today's talk. Do you have values? Well, keep them. A simple example here. Is loyalty to friends a value of yours? Then don't blame a woman if you give it up. Be willing to look her in the eye and tell her that if she is unprincipled enough to force you to make an unnecessary choice between her and your friend, that you will side, not with your friend, but with your values. A hint. That is not good news for the woman child giving you the ultimatum, but it is fantastic news for you. Another example. Do you value yourself? And by that I mean, are your interests in life, your hobbies and pastimes important enough that you will make time and money for them? Well, if you do actually value those things, you won't give them up because she tries to emotionally or sexually blackmail you to the point that you surrender them. There are no victims here, guys, just volunteers. My pops was right. If your values are disposable for anything, so is your dignity. Blaming anyone for that but yourself is a mistake that will likely cost you a lot more than a round of golf or an afternoon at your favorite fishing hole. Your values, whatever they are, define you. So the next time you hear some heartbroken man saying, "I gave up everything for her and she still screwed me over," take a moment to reword that statement in your head. He's really saying, "I gave up everything for her, leaving her no reason to respect me and me no reason to respect myself. So of course I got screwed over." For those of you who think I'm being too hard on men who get shafted in relationships, I understand. Still, until men quit entering relationships in a bent-over position, this will keep happening. Well, that's it for today's talk. Stay tuned here for Thursday's tips. I hope you've enjoyed, and see you next time. Hey guys, it's time for Thursday's tip of the week, and this one is simple. Whatever you do, don't get married. You don't have to get married to have a relationship, to have sex, to get love, or even to have a child in your life if that's what you want. If you're not with a woman who is able to see the wisdom in the marriage strike, then you're with the wrong woman. If her childish romantic fantasies outweigh the fact that your neck is on the chopping block, then 86 her sorry ass and find someone else. There's just too much at risk. You must always remember that in reality, you are marrying the state, and once the state has you, it won't let go. This also means you should check the laws where you live very, very closely, like with a legal microscope, and find out how the law treats cohabitation. If cohabitation makes you legally married at any point, don't do it. You might even consider, if possible, moving to a place that favors you legally. Just remember, be Nancy Reagan where it comes to marriage. Just say no. That's it for the Thursday tip. Please give us a sub, a share, and a like, and be sure to help us grow our social media. Links to all of that and to our Patreon are in the low bar. Take care now. Bye-bye.